Let's wrap up June. Hey guys, welcome back to Portable Magic, or welcome if you are new here. I'm Trinity, and today I will be going over my June wrap up. And I have to say, I had one of the best reading months I've had in a really long time. I don't know necessarily about like content wise. I'm still not reading the epic grimdark fantasy that I used to. I'm still not delving into sci-fi as hard as I was. And I'm still not finishing series. Even though this was supposed to be the month of series continuations, it became the month of arcs. Okay, so for the month of June, I read 14 books and DNF'd 2 of them. Now, I will say that all of this information you can find on my previous weekly wrap-ups, except for the books I'm going to talk about at the end of this video. So if I talk about them very briefly, that's why. I also got up to my normal page count, which was 5,753 pages. That is a lot of pages. 12 books is a lot of books. So I'm very happy with that. I wasn't thinking that I had read that many. And I do think it's because whenever I get ARCs, I get ALCs, so advanced listening copies. I get the audios, and I can go through those fairly quickly. But for some reason, I have not been on top of ARCs, and so I do have a lot to catch up on. However, the ones I had requested in June were read in June, and I'm pretty proud of that fact. And as far as my stats go otherwise, I'm still at almost 80% fantasy. I am feeling the fantasy burnout. I talked about this in my July TBR, so I am trying to break away from that a little bit. The books I've been buying have not been fantasy. I did purchase 2 fantasy this last round, but I just have been staying away from purchasing it. And so, yeah, a little bit of burnout. I do think that I'm also trending away from fantasy romance. That's not going to be apparent in this wrap up, but I'm starting to feel that I need other things in my life. It will be apparent in my July TBR. And I'm still looking at 300 to 450 as like my sweet spot page count wise in books. Those take over any other page count numbers in my spreadsheet. Now, one number that is great and one number that's not so great, I have read 14% of my reading being ARCs this year and 20% of my reading being book box books. However, that does mean that only 26% of the books I've read this year have been off my physical shelves. That's not good. I definitely need to be reading the books I have physically. This is a little skewed because I am also trying to clear out my Audible library. And when I say Audible library, I am including Chirp and other audiobook libraries that I have, because I don't just have Audible. But I would really like to see my physical shelves being a much higher percentage of what I'm reading than what is currently shown. Now, we have finally got to a point where I can say that my average rating this year is 4 stars. We had been sitting on no 5 stars for so long. I think I honestly had 3 up until this month. And so I'm kind of mind blown that I found more, that I've been able to raise this up from like a 3 point, I think it was a 3.4 at one point, but all the way up to a 4. And that just makes me really happy. Now, publication year, I'm sticking with 2023 and 2024. So most of what I've read has been fairly new releases. And I say that it's 60% of my reading. So I'm pretty happy with that. I do want to get to some more backlist books, and like I said, I'd like to continue some series that I have had on the back burner for quite some time. You guys saw my series list, and I'll put that in the description down below, but like, it's extensive. So I think that's all the stats I have to give you currently. Those are the stats that I track anyway. So let's get into what I actually read. And sorry, my computer is in my lap, so I am looking down a little bit. So the first book that I read would be Thick as Thieves. I got this from Everand because I didn't have a physical copy of the book. I've been looking for a hardback copy to match my Among Thieves edition that I have. And I've been considering buying a special edition of Among Thieves because I know they exist. I know someone who has one. And I just love this series so much. I think that the second book is just as fun as the first book. I really enjoyed the characters. These are a group of people that, while they're morally gray, they're fun to follow. And heists will always be a thing I enjoy reading. Now, in the second book, it's kind of more a hunt for a person than an item, and I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I believe I gave this 4.5 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star for me, and I can only say that I just didn't get the rush of excitement that I got with Among Thieves. And that's what held me back from a 5-star. I do love this duology though. I think it's great. And I love the twist that is entered into the beginning of the first book to make this a duology. And I enjoyed how that played out across the book. Highly recommend. The next book that I tried to read would be Shark Heart. And I DNF'd this one. I DNF'd this one though because I really like weird books that explore weird things, but I don't like weird story structure. And so Shark Heart had too many shifts in the way that it was told. Like, we would go from almost diary entries to a play to normal narration, and I was just like thrown every time it switched. And I got about halfway through it though. It wasn't like I DNF'd it really early on. I just couldn't get into it, and the problem that is presented in this book is that one of our main characters is turning into a shark, and their wife is trying to support them through this, even though they don't really know what's going on. They just know that their husband is hiding a secret, and but it, like, I didn't feel that could have been resolved in a novella, I think, instead of what this book turned out to be. So I ended up DNFing that one. Next, I read Blood Heir. Oh my gosh. Emil Zhao. Or Emily. I don't know exactly how to say that first name. Hello. Why is no one talking about this book? Is it because it's YA? I really wonder if no one's reading this because it's YA. 5 stars. 5 stars. It blew me away. I cannot believe I had this on my series that are books that are going to self-destruct, because this was absolutely amazing. Again, I go into detail in my weekly wrap-up, so I won't go into a huge amount of detail here, but I love this main character. I love the political landscape of this world. I really love what our main character represents in this world. It is so cool. And the second book is just as good. I did read Red Tigress along with this one. And again, I went into detail in my weekly wrap up, but I really enjoyed this series. I had planned to binge it, but I realized I had some arcs that I needed to read, so I ended up reading those. And so this third book of this one will actually probably be read in July, even though it wasn't in my July TBR, because I had planned to read it this month. But so good. So good. 5 stars. 5 stars. And I believe I gave Red Tigress 4 stars. But still, really, really good book. And then my biggest disappointment of the month, of the year, of the decade, I don't know. 5 Broken Blades by Maya Corland. No, I hated this book, and you guys can see me rant about it quite a bit, so I will just give you a brief synopsis here. This is pitched as 5 assassins going after the king, let the best man win. This is about 3 romances that blossom over the course of the book, and nothing much else. So I've ranted about this book a lot already. I don't want to go into it here. I didn't like it. I did give it 3 stars though, because while I was really mad about the misrepresentation of this book, I thought it was fun, but it wasn't well written, and it just kept me engaged through the whole book. So I needed to know where the relationships were going, but that's not what I came here for. Next was the first arc that I knocked off of my list for the month, and that would be The Curse of Sins, the follow-up to Curse of Saints. And I enjoyed this one. I didn't like it as much as the first one, like not nearly as much as the first one. And it had some pacing issues. Definitely needed an editor. I don't know what happened with this book where it was not edited to fix the pacing issues, but whoa, they were extreme. And I say extreme because the first book was so good and so well written and just took me by surprise. As far as a fantasy romance goes, I was shocked. And I was shocked at how well laid out the politics were in the first book, how well laid out the character backstories were in the first book. And then we got the second book, and it just wasn't quite what I was hoping for. And honestly, it's forgettable. I can't remember what happened in the second book, but I remember that first book, even years later, very keenly. And so I gave it 4 stars because it was enjoyable. It was still the writing style that I liked, but it definitely needed some editing help. It definitely needed a push in a different direction. But what can you do? What can you do? The next book that I read would be Dragon Fruit, and I actually gave this one to my son. Again, I explained this, but I liked it. It wasn't the book for me. I kept reading going, you know, if I was 12, 13, 14, however old, I probably would really love this. And it is young adult, and I feel like it's young adult written for young adults, not young adult meant to be read by adults, but deemed young adult because the characters are young. Like, I don't feel like it was that. It was just young, and it was not what I was looking for, but my son loved it. So it's a happy DNF. Next, I read When the Moon Hatched, and oh my lordy, this one was so good. So good. I believe I gave this one 4.5 stars as well, but it was not what I was expecting. It did have a little bit of pacing issues. I talked about this before. I said it didn't have pacing issues, but I realized when I was talking about the rise and fall of action and it being like a roller coaster, that does mean a little bit of pacing issues. So I liked that these characters had such an amazing backstory. I love the way Sarah A. Parker chose to write this book as well, because it's told in various ways where it feels like a flashback, but it's almost dual timeline. And so you're left wondering why it feels that way through the course of the book. Did I figure out why it felt that way? Yes, I did. So I was so intrigued by the mystery of the dragons. I was so intrigued by the couple in this book. And I loved the main male character. That rarely happens where I'm just absolutely in love with the main male character, especially when they are cinnamon roll-esque. But this was fun. And it has a trope in it that I don't like. It has kind of a dual timeline thing to it, which I typically don't like. But it worked in this one for some reason, and I can't explain why it worked. Then we get to my biggest surprise of the year, and I read The Honey Witch, this by Sydney J. Shields. This was my Patreon buddy read, and we didn't get around to reading it until really late, and I think I'm the only one that finished it. But I thought this was really cute. And I do have an issue with cozy fantasy. You guys know this. It's not my thing. I didn't really want to read this, but when it came in my fairy loot box, I was like, okay, well, I'll give it a shot, because there is another one that sounds very similar, written by an author that I absolutely love, that I'd like to try, that has a similar synopsis to this. And I was like, okay, well, if I like this, maybe I'll like that, but I like that author, so there's a good chance I'll like that one more than this one. And so I was going to pick that one up. Anyway, all of that to say, this was highly enjoyable. What did I rate it? 3.5 stars. I liked it, guys. I didn't love it. I liked it. It was sweet, it was cute, and that's never going to be a 5-star for me. It just isn't. And it's hard to push it to a 4-star for me, because these are not things I seek out when I'm reading. However, the relationship was cute, the story was good, the ending was a little bit explosive, especially for a cozy fantasy, but there are things that I really thought it lacked. One of those things is things happening off page. I have come to realize that this is a typical cozy fantasy thing. The big events that you're typically waiting for in a fantasy novel don't happen on page. They happen outside of the purview of the main character, or, you know, the main character's not involved in the big thing, so we don't see it. And why? That's just dumb. But that's how cozy fantasy works, and that's probably the main reason I don't like it. I don't like it when things happen off page in any book. And so you add it to this, and I'm like, just another reason for me to not like cozy fantasy. However, very enjoyable. Highly recommend. If you like Emily Wilde, you will probably like this one. That's all I gotta say. We talked about Red Tigress when we talked about Blood Heir. So the next book that I read would be A Feather So Black. Did I give this book 5 stars? I gave it 4.5. I really enjoyed this. I couldn't give it 5 stars though, because it has something in it that I don't like. And I can't tell you what it is because it's spoilery, but I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I loved it so much. I'm so excited to see where this goes. And if it wasn't for that one dang part of the book that just got under my skin, I would have really enjoyed this. And I loved it. I loved it. And we've also gotten to the books that I haven't talked about in a weekly wrap up. So let me go into a little bit more detail about this one. We have a princess changeling who loves her mother, loves her country, and is set on an almost impossible task. She has to go enter the Feylands and recapture her sister, the girl whose place she took. And in doing so, she has to go with the boy she fell in love with when she was young and never really got over. And he fell in love with her. They were really young. He never really got over. But he has to marry this sister. And it kind of goes from there. But they realize that they're in love and there's nothing they can do about it. So there's tension in that regard. They go after the sister. She's not what our main character expects. There's a lot of gaslighting. There's a lot of manipulation that went into how our main character thinks. And so when she meets her sister, she's very excited and just full of love for the girl and doesn't want to do anything to hurt her. Even though she's in love with her betrothed, she really doesn't want to jeopardize what they're about to have or what she thinks they're about to have and what she's not allowed to have. And then we meet the Fae King, and he was a blast to read. I loved his perspective. I can't remember if he actually has a perspective in this, but his chapters where he is in the chapters, I loved him. And I really liked the relationship between our main character and the Fae King. It turned out to be something that kept me turning the page. And even though something happens and I'm not happy about it, it's not with them. But yeah, I can't tell you because it's spoilery. But anyway, such a great book. I can't wait to get the next one, and I really hope I can get my hands on a Fairy Loot edition of the next one because I really want to see where this story goes. Next, I need to talk about 2 books that made me so happy, blew my mind, were so good. I have a 5-star and a 4-star. I will explain that 4-star, but I could not believe how good these next 2 books were, and I'm probably going to do a dedicated review for these 2 books because holy mama jamma. Talk about getting out of a reading slump. These are the 2 books that you need to be reading that have just come out or are about to come out if you're in a reading slump because I love them so much. Let's talk about the 4-star first. The Sky on Fire by Jen Lyons. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, this is probably one of the most fun books I've read in a really long time. I love the main character. I always love a heist. I love a heist. I will always be on board for that. And this is a standalone fantasy. Keep that in mind. I really enjoyed how fast-paced, how detail-oriented, I loved this book. I love this book. It's going to be hard for me to talk about because this is one of those, are the characters great? No. Is the atmosphere great? No. Oh, what makes this book so fun? I just enjoyed it so much. The plot's fast-paced. It moves. The characters have fun interactions and you start rooting for them based off of that. Do you get a deep emotional attachment to them? No. So it's one of those that I think you read just for the sheer enjoyment of reading. And I can't tell you anything other than that to make you read the book. But I don't think every book has to be so deep. I don't think every book has to be there to teach us something. Sometimes It just needs to be fun. And The Sky on Fire is that. It's definitely made me intrigued to pick up Run of Kings. I'm still a little scared of it though, because I know it's very different from The Sky on Fire. And that is very detail oriented. The world building is great. The characters are intricate and the plot's very intricate. So I'm just a little nervous about that one. But I highly, highly recommend The Sky on Fire, especially if you're like in a reading slump and just need something to get you going, or if you're looking for a fun book to read, you want to be out of your head, just escape into this world and take an adventure with these characters. I think you will love it. And I loved it. Again, 4 stars, because the main thing I got out of this was sheer enjoyment. But I can't recommend it enough. Speaking of heists and my love of them, the Stardust Grill. Now, this one does get deep. This one does get intricate. This one talks about interspecies relationships, and it talks about found family, and it talks about all of these different cultural things within these different worlds. And it was very, very intricate, touching, and just I loved this book so much. Now, this one has great characters, great atmosphere, great writing, great plotting. It is about a heist. There is a little bit of tension between 2 factions for this heist to be pulled off. And there's some betrayal, some cultural clashing in this. But it's really just a heartwarming book that I don't necessarily think would be deemed cozy or sweet, because it can get fast paced, it can get vicious in places. So don't think of this as a cozy, but know that like it is very heartwarming. It is about found family. It is about acceptance and love and what that looks like across species. And it's just so good. It's so good. I gave this book 5 stars. It is fun. There is a lot of entertainment value in this. It did get close to making me cry, which never really happens. So there's that. But I think if you're looking to break out of a reading slump, either The Sky on Fire or The Stardust Grill will do that, because of how they're written, that they're, fast paced, but one is just a good old time and one is really a heartwarming good old time. I definitely, definitely recommend these 2 books. Now, ending my ARC roundup that I did instead of reading the series I was supposed to read, I read When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. I didn't like this one, guys. I finished it. It was only about 167 pages or something like that. And I felt like it was just introducing creatures to people who may not know Slavic creatures, Slavic folklore. And that's all it was doing. There wasn't a large plot to follow. There was not, I mean, the ending does get a little explosive and kind of made me wake up a little bit as far as the book was concerned, but getting there was a slog. And I gave it 3 stars because the ending was good. And if you can get through the slog of the beginning, you might enjoy the ending enough to give it a higher rating than 3 stars. I just didn't care by the time we got there. And there's not enough time to get ingratiated with the main character, and then the main character is being very secretive. So you don't learn about what's going on until the very end. That's okay in a novella that's very short. But for almost 200 pages, I feel like we should have been let in on what was going on way before that happened. So that ended my month. Oh no, wait, I forgot. I read one more thing. I did not want to end my somewhat excellent month on a sour note. So I did end up reading volume 7 of Saga, and oh, my heart. Oh my gosh. Oh, I was not anticipating what was going to happen in this one, and I'm so sad. I'm so sad. 5 stars. 5 stars. Wow. I can't even tell you what happens because it's volume 7 and it would be so spoilery. Like, yeah. I cried. I cried. So there are not very many books that can make me do that. I've said this even just recently, like for the last book. Not many books can make me cry, but I'm starting to tear up right now just thinking about what happens in volume 7 of this. And Oh, look at this. I'm almost done with the first compendium. I will be so sad. I'm going to track down compendium number 2 if it's available. I don't know if it is. But, Saga, what are you doing to me? I need to cry now. All right, that's it for my video today. Like, subscribe, and don't forget I have a Patreon if you'd like to support everything that I do on this channel, if you guys would like to be involved in the bunny raids, or if you guys would like to start being involved in the book that we're going to be passing around and annotating. I always have giveaways on the Patreon, and we do bingo boards every month to see who can earn a book from me. But I will talk to you guys in my next video. Bye.